Welcome everyone to our webinar, Building a Peaceful Future, Understanding Disarmament. I am Gail Galang, your host in this webinar. We are delighted to have you join us today in this vital conversation about promoting global peace through disarmament. In a world marked by conflict and uncertainty, understanding disarmament is crucial for achieving a safer future for all. I'd like to call on Mr. Ramon Moleño Jr. to lead the opening prayer. Sermon.
In the name of the Father, of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, we are gathered here today to reflect on the sharing of our resource persons on the theme, Building a Peaceful Future, Understanding Disarmament. As we discern on this topic, let us also pray for the eternal repose of the souls of Pope Francis and Father Brian Gore of Pax Christi Negros. May we be inspired by the word and action of Pope Francis, the People's Pope, who reminds us of our shared responsibility to care for one another and our world. We also honor the poor man's priest, whose unwavering love for the Filipino people and commitment to justice have inspired many. We hope that the sharing of our resource persons will enlighten and guide us to strive for peace. We also ask for guidance from our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you very much, Sermon, for that very meaningful prayer where we also paid our respects for Pope Francis and Father Brian. Maraming salamat. Now, throughout this session, we will dive into the fundamentals of disarmament and highlight its significance in fostering local and international security. To formally welcome you and to share the objectives of the webinar, may I call on Ms. Riza Camacho. Ms. Riza?
Thank you, Dr. Gail. Good afternoon to all our participants, speakers, and peace advocates joining us in this important conversation. It is an honor to welcome all of you today, especially in our webinar entitled Building a Peaceful Future, Understanding Disarmament. In an era marked by global conflict, political tension, and the alarming spread of weapons, both conventional and nuclear, this dialogue could not be more urgent. According to the report of Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, global military spending reached $2,718 billion in 2024, an increase of 9.4% in real terms from 2023, and the steepest year-on-year rise since at least the end of the Cold War. In addition, the Arms Control Association estimated the 2025 global nuclear warhead inventories to reach 12,400. Take note that nearly 90% of these nuclear warheads belong to the US and Russia. The figures shared with you remind us that the pursuit of peace must go hand in hand with informed advocacy, courageous dialogue, and policy transformation. This afternoon, we deepen our understanding of disarmament, not only as a technical or diplomatic process, but as a moral and civic imperative. The Philippines, through its ratification of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons in 2021, has taken a bold stand against the proliferation of such threats. Our own laws, like Republic Act number 10591 or the Comprehensive Firearms and Ammunition Regulation Act, also reflect a national commitment to responsible arms control. With the help of our speakers this afternoon, we hope to learn more about landmines, small arms and light weapons, nuclear weapons, and cluster munitions. Moreover, we will shine a light on the essential roles that civil society, youth, and women play in advocating for disarmament. May today's webinar inspire action, amplify awareness, and plant the seeds for a future built on not on fear, but on hope and solidarity. Again, thank you for your presence. Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat.
Thank you, Ms. Riza. So our goal today is not just to share information, but to cultivate dialogue and collaboration among our participants. So looking at everyone today, I recognize that maybe some of you are new in peace education or peace advocacy, but or maybe the topics that you see right there, no, disarmament. Okay, so today it was said that we will talk about landmines. We're going to talk about nuclear weapons. Okay, and many more. So I'd just like to find out from you, no? Could you write down in the chat box what disarmament means to you? Okay, so there are no right or wrong answers, but we can start from there. Okay, what does disarmament mean to you? So can you please write it down? We'll just wait a bit. Okay, so let me read some answers that are coming in. So, end to violence. Okay. Disarmament means the elimination of weapons. All right. How about the others? A non-violent means to address weapons proliferation. Okay. Limiting or abolishing weapons. All right. I'm also getting some direct messages. That's good. Weapons reduction. So we come into this forum with some idea about what it is, no? And even if this is not your major, this is something that's very important to know. And we try to encourage you, to try to find more, to have that curiosity, to find out more things about um, maybe things that are not commonly talked about in your field. Okay, weapons reduction. Okay. Okay. All right. So, as members of Pax Christi Filipinas, as members of your own institutions and maybe your own organizations, we have this unique opportunity to work together towards a common objective, which is a more peaceful, disarmed world. Okay, so let's get into the introduction of our speakers. I'd like to know if Ms. Shane Marioles is around. Ms. Shane, are you already in?
Yes, I'm already in, Dr. Gail.
Okay,
Good
so
afternoon, everyone.
kindly introduce our four speakers for today.
Okay. So let's get to know our four speakers or sharers this afternoon. Our first speaker is Miss Beverly Orozco. Bev is the program director at the Ortigas and program developments,
Okay,
advocacy for
sorry, Ms.
marginalized
Shane,
Canadians on
sorry to
peace,
cut you.
disarmament,
Hello,
and
Ms. Shane.
yes, po.
Oo, medyo choppy ka, so allow me to continue the introductions for you. Okay, so thank you, Miss Shane. Miss Shane is now in the airport right now, but she really wanted to be here. So let me just continue the introductions. Our first speaker is Miss Beverly Orozco. Bev is the program director at the Gaston Z. Ortigas Peace Institute. where she focuses on program development, advocacy, and coalition building in peace building,
All right, okay,
particularly
okay.
for marginalized communities. She plays a key role in campaigns on peace, disarmament, and human rights, while collaborating with government agencies and stakeholders. Additionally, she serves as the National Coordinator of Generation Peace for Youth Network, or Gen Peace Network, advocating for youth peace and security and women peace and security. With over 20 years of experience, she manages strategic initiatives, develops training programs, and engages in disarmament efforts. So today, Bev will share about landmines and its impact in the communities. Now, allow me to also introduce the next speaker so that later the discussion will just flow smoothly. The second speaker is Miss Arlisa Bianca Pabotoy. She was formerly the Women, Peace, and Security Project Officer at the Center for Peace Education here at Miriam College. She is an active Asia Pacific member of the International Action Network on Small Arms, or IANSA, and the Control Arms Coalition. Today, she will focus on the current state of arms control in Asia and the Pacific, emerging and intersecting issues surrounding the global manufacturing and trade of arms, key, key arms trade frameworks and treaties relevant to the Philippines, and activities and engagements of civil society, including young people on the issue. Our third speaker is another Bianca, Bianca Dominique Reyes. Bianca is the technical assistant for the Center for Peace Education and moderator for Pax Christi Miriam College. Her work centers on peace education as well as advocating for women and youth in peace and security initiatives. Today, she will be discussing the critical issues surrounding nuclear weapons and the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons on behalf of Dr. Loretta Castro. And finally, our last speaker is Mirma May Tica Ortiz. Driven by a commitment to building a more peaceful world, Mirma Tica Ortiz has been actively involved in peace work since 2009. She serves as a board member of Pax Christi Pilipinas and Generation Peace Youth Network and is a Rotary Peace Activator. Her passion lies in addressing the needs and roles of youth, the youth, and women in peace and security. As a faculty member at Miriam College's International Studies Department, she teaches gender, peace, and law and is the faculty advisor of the Model United Nations program. So today, she will share her insights on the devastating and long-lasting impact of cluster munitions on development, peace, and security. So let's embark on this important journey together. Thank you for being here. And without further ado, let's begin. So I'd like to call on Miss Bev Oros.
Thank you, Miss Gail. Nakakita naman na yung PowerPoint ka?
Yes, we can see your PowerPoint and we can hear you, Miss Bev.
Yes, thank you very much. Sige. I'll just turn off my video, making sure that I have a stable connection. Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome fellow Miriam College students and our friends from Pax Christi Pilipinas. Okay, first of all, I'm handling this sharing on landmines, the Mine Ban Treaty, a global commitment to end suffering and build safer communities. Okay. So first, let us define what landmine is, specifically the anti-personnel mine and how it works. The anti-personnel mine is essentially ammunition designed to be placed on or near the ground. It is specifically engineered to explode when a person is present, nearby, or makes contact with. These devices can be buried or are buried in fields and forests and lies dormant, waiting silently, sometimes for decades, to be triggered by human presence. So anti-personnel mine is also, we call them silent killers because they silently wait for victims. Improvised devices created to function also in this way are also considered anti-personnel mines and are banned by mine ban treaty. The key characteristic of this weapon and what makes them so devastating is that they cannot distinguish between soldiers and civilians. Crucially, the vast majority of the victims were innocent and defenseless civilians, particularly children. At the state of the world that pushed for a process was marked by the widespread and horrific impact of anti-personnel mines on civilians. These weapons were recognized as silent killers that cause widespread suffering and casualties. Okay, the map represents the contaminated lands of landmines. So this image is based on the Landmine Monitor 2023. Beyond the immediate toll, landmines have severe long-term consequences for communities and countries recovering from conflict. Landmines obstruct economic development, making land unusable and preventing access to essential resources like farms. Landmines obstruct economic development and reconstruction, preventing safe access to essential resources like farmland, water resources, and forests. This hinders agricultural activity, disrupts transportation services, discourages investment and development, and prolongs people's and countries' reliance on international assistance. In some cases, landmines inhibited the repatriation of refugees and international displaced persons or IDPs, making return routes and former settlement areas very dangerous. This traps people in cycles of poverty, making ordinary movement and gainful employment impossible, hindering the delivery of government services, and landmines clearly obstructs physical access. The humanitarian toll, landmine continues to kill or severely injure people for years. For those who survive, the path to recovery is long and very painful. Survivors often face lifelong scarring, requiring long-term medical assistance, specialized treatment, and psychosocial and mental health. Landmines prevent the delivery of government services and hinder access to healthcare, education, and basic services such as electricity. Repairing infrastructures like roads and power grids is made difficult and very costly. Landmines pose a grave threat to the full enjoyment of human rights, including the rights to life, freedom of movement, health, education, work, adequate food, and the right to development. Landmines undermine the confidence and security needed for political reconciliation and reestablishment of community services. Environmental damage. Landmines have a major impact on environment. Unavailability of mined farmlands leads to overuse of existing lands and contributes to urbanization issues. They can cause loss of biodiversity, soil degradation, and water contamination. Continued instability, landmines serve as physical obstacle to unity and reconstruction and can prolong economic misery, fueling tensions and threatening further conflict. In essence, landmines create a cycle of suffering and poverty that can last for generations, making daily life dangerous and hindering every aspect of post-conflict recovery and development. So these are some photos, some headlines of landmines for the past 5 years. The humanitarian crisis, characterized by the devastating humanitarian impact of landmines, fueled international efforts. There was a recognition of the role of public conscience in furthering the principles of humanity, evidenced by the call for a total ban on anti-personnel mines and the efforts of organizations like International Campaign to Ban Landmines, International Red Cross, and the Red Crescent Movement. Key international developments including the UNSCR last December 1996, urging all states to pursue vigorously effective, legally binding international agreement to ban these landmines. Declarations like the Ottawa Ottawa in October 96 and Brussels in 1997 urged the international community to negotiate an agreement. The humanitarian situation of land caused by landmines welcome for measures taken prohibiting and restricting mines, creating the imperative and diplomatic momentum, leading to the groundbreaking diplomatic initiative known as the Ottawa Process and the eventual adoption of Mine Ban Treaty. Our country, the Philippine campaign was led by the Philippine Campaign to Ban Landmines, with notable peace and disarmament advocates, namely Judge Sol Santos, Professor Miriam Coronel Ferrer, and Mr. Alfredo Lubang. The photo here is from the 2024 Landmine Monitor. This is the status of the state parties of the Mine Ban Treaty. The 1997 Convention on the Prohibition of the Use, Stockpiling, Production of Mines highlighted the purpose to end the suffering caused by this weapon. Key obligations include prohibition of developing, producing, stockpiling, or transferring anti-personnel mines, and mandated for destruction, promoting international cooperation for mine clearance, and transparency through reporting. The Mine Ban Treaty was ratified by 165 countries, and the treaty has led to the destruction of millions of landmines and the clearance of thousands of square kilometers of land. However, mines continue to pose a grave threat, and efforts on ongoing to achieve universal adherence, accelerate the mining operations, and ensure comprehensive victim assistance. For the Philippines, we have a good standing record on landmines. We are a state party. The country signed the treaty in 1997,
Why are you
ratified,
tagging me? I'm on.
ratified into a law
Oh,
in 2000,
you
and
better
became a
say that.
state party in 2000. For now, back in 2001, 2004, PCBL has been advocating for the Philippine Landmines Bill. However, it didn't gain traction. But under the RA 9851, which is our IHL or International Humanitarian Law, using production and of anti-personnel landmines is prohibited under our law, and under our Firearms Law 9516, it's also prohibited. So sa Philippines, ang contamination ng landmines natin is connected to remnants of war. So meaning the conflicts back in 70s, 80s, 90s, ito ang pinanggagalingan ng mga landmines sa Philippines, particularly in southern Mindanao. So the country also contains the large amounts of unexploded ordinances dating back then sa World War II. For now, walang formal program ang government natin in dealing with landmines, IEDs, and ERWs. However, pag may mga joint exercises, particularly with US military, kasama sa treaty agreement is yung ang demining operation. So back in 2011, with the military exercises, 163 tons of unexploded ordnance were cleared through this military treaty. If you're familiar with the Bangsamoro, the Philippine government and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, they signed a comprehensive peace agreement which includes the provision on landmines and UXOs. So may mga clearing operations now happening under the peace agreement led by PCBL and the Swiss Foundation for Demining, and European Union is funding this demining operations. Who are using landmines? So there are accounts and reports that the New People's Army are using landmines until now. So mataas yung data of usage of landmines of the NPA against our soldiers. However, under the Comprehensive Agreement to Respect on Human Rights and International Humanitarian Law, or CARIL, signed in 1998, violation ang ginagawa ng NPA. Okay, I'm sharing you two screens of after more than 2 decades of banning the landmines. Ito na ang status ng landmines in Southeast Asia, particularly in Cambodia. Marami na rin ang na-clear na mines. However, hanggang ngayon, hindi pa rin ma-utilize ang lands. Basically, we need to clear them na safe na rin siya. However, yung facility or the land itself, kulang sa mga infrastructure for them to be productive. And here, I'm presenting you why we urgently need to understand what's happening with the landmines. Backsliding, I mean, you do know what it means to ratify, be a state party. Very alarming that there are a lot of countries who are pulling back from their commitments to ban landmines. So Finland expressed that that Finland will be pulling out of the treaty, and then this one, alam naman natin, US and Russia is a producer and they use landmines. And then for 3 decades, US has been supporting the demining operations, particularly in Cambodia, with freezing US aid that disrupt yung mine clearance operations. And then with Russia's full-scale invasion in Ukraine, this is causing Poland, Estonia, Lithuania to pull out or expressing pull out from their commitments to to banning the landmines. And then Landmine Monitor mentioned that landmine is being actively used in Russia, Myanmar, Iran, and North Korea. Here is the list of countries na hindi nag-sign, hindi nag-ratify, hindi state party sa sa landmine ban. Okay. For Southeast Asia, I presented you earlier the Philippines. Sa Cambodia, ang problem ngayon ng Cambodia is during monsoonal season, the more na bumaha, the more na babasa yung lands, mines are being buried, tas hindi siya matrace. And unfortunately, walang records kung walang records kept kung nasaan ang mga minefields or minefields na ito. And of course, if you've read about Laos, between 10 years, 1964 to 1973, more than 270 million cluster submunitions were dropped, making them the most mine contaminated country. 270 million clusters will need 70 years to clear landmines. And then for Myanmar, very, very alarming ang nangyayari sa Myanmar. Out of more than 14 states in Myanmar is contaminated by landmines. They are being used by the military junta and the ethnic armed organizations, it's the people's organization who are also using landmines. Ngayon, ang casualties nito shows here na 1/3 ng casualty are children. And then there's a research mentioning that the junta's planting of landmines in homes, villages, and farms appears to be designed to both terrorize and harm civilians. With that, what can people or what peace advocates, students can do is continuing community engagement and empowerment. Particularly sa landmines is the risk education or mine awareness. I was highlighting na puro children, malaking percentage na children ang affected ng landmines dahil yung itsura ng landmines, it's either made of plastic or shiny metal, so mukha siyang laruan, kaya ang tendency, children would look at it as toy and then eventually will explode. And then this is very important to the community because sila ang malapit sa mga farmland, sila ang pumapasok sa forest for harvesting. And then for us, peace and disarmament education and advocacy among students and civil society is very important to highlight the dangers of weapons, the backsliding of the commitments, and then promoting peace building and human rights values. And then for the government and as citizens of the country, we should make sure that to engage the government na hindi nire-revise or nagpo-pull back ang government sa commitments lang through revising policies, potentially introducing again the use of landmines, but we should be working towards lobbying for increasing protection of human rights and protection of civilian in the context of armed conflict. In the case of regional cooperation and partnership, people-to-people dialogue, learning exchanges, sharing knowledge, relevant information, and promoting disarmament in our work. Yeah, that's very important. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Miss Bev, for that presentation. I was able to get some reactions, but it was it was sent directly to me. Do you mind if we ask lang a few questions? Ito nakalagay dito. What might be the reason why some countries will not sign the treaty?
We're basically, so should I address it now?
Yeah.
Yeah, basically, when we talk about war, conflict, it's still money business. Those who didn't sign are producers and users themselves. Yeah.
So that's the reason why. Okay, so please continue to send your insights, reactions. Maybe you're hearing something for the first time and you're shocked and you just want to let it out. Okay lang. This is a safe space. You can also send it to me directly and I'll read it like that. Things that you don't know. Like for example, ang tagal pala, no? Before, Miss Bev, ang tagal pala bago mawala yung visa ng landmine. Hindi lang pala siya, parang naulanan lang, wala ng visa, no? And as far as World War II, okay.
Remnants of war.
So those are the things that we're hearing right now, no? Maybe some of you for the first time. So thank you, Ms. Bev. So now I would like to call on Ms. Bianca Pabotoy for her presentation on small arms and light weapons.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Bianca. Also an alumni from Miriam College, so very excited to be in this room. I will give a briefing on small arms control and the issue of small arms, both at national level, Philippines, and international level. I just want to check. Okay. So first off, I think just to level off our understanding, small arms refer to weapons designed for individual use. So they include what's here on your screen: revolvers, self-loading pistols, rifles, machine guns, assault rifles, and so on and so forth. Light weapons pertain to weapons designed for use by 2 or 3 persons serving as a crew, although some may be carried and used by a single person. So they would include heavy machine guns, handheld, underbarrel and mounted grenade launchers, and so on and so forth. It's very technical, but I don't want to emphasize the technical so much. Just to give you an understanding, when we say small arms, this is what it means. When we say light weapons, it is what it means. And when we say small arms and light weapons, it's a combination of the two, as these terms will be used in the succeeding slides. And finally, ammunition, which is also a repeated term in my presentation, refers to the complete round or cartridge or components, including bullets or projectiles, that are used in any small arm or light weapon. So the next, okay. Sorry, I'm getting used to the presentation view. So, on the issue of small arms and light weapons, why should we care? I think Miss Riza gave a good introduction in her opening session. In 2020, 7 countries in the Asian region experienced armed conflicts, so namely Afghanistan, India, Pakistan, Indonesia, Myanmar, the Philippines, Thailand, but these are just the recorded ones in 2020. The cost of war continues to rise, with the military industrial complex absorbing vast amounts of government funding. So funds that are supposedly allotted and reserved for development initiatives are increasingly redirected and spent on emergency relief operations fueled by armed conflict or cleaning up after violent conflict. So for example, it connects to the landmine issue. A lot of funding actually goes to demining the mines. And despite the lockdown, for example, in 2020, millions worth of arms exports to conflict-affected countries continue despite the shortage of medical supplies. And so the trend we're seeing in this year is that actually a lot of countries are arming themselves more. So we're going into an arms race, precisely because of a lot of ongoing armed conflicts, not just in Asia, but for example, in Europe with Ukraine and Russia, and in the Middle East between Israel and Palestine. And in the Philippines, the illicit trade and proliferation of loose firearms and weapons continue to be a key issue of peace and security. Small arms proliferation enabled and sustained the 2 major armed conflicts in the country, and the supply of guns also allow for the formation of private armed groups, which enable political dynasties to perpetuate themselves in power. In 2014, Filipinos owned an estimated 3.9 million firearms, with some 2.1 million illegal. Current laws in the country do not help also in regulating the proliferation of small arms, although we have laws to regulate. Republic Act 1059-1 allows a citizen to own and possess a maximum of 15 guns, and if the citizen is a certified gun collector, they can own more than 15. And the law also exempts a long list of professionals from applying for a permit to carry their guns outside their homes. Okay. And actually, during 2021, CPE, in partnership with the International Action Network on Small Arms, or IANSA, conducted a research report on gender and small arms and light weapons in the BARM region. And from one of the interviews, an NGO worker shared that when you have a gun, it gives you a feeling of power and invincibility, that I can impose my will on you. However, small arms and light weapons ownership, both legal and illegal, has undeniable risks to both men and women. While more men are directly impacted by arms, becoming primary victims of gun violence, women are differently affected by small arms and light weapons, and also are vulnerable to being recipients of gun violence. So I'll share more of that in my succeeding slides. And so now, Ate Bev shared the Landmine Treaty, on small arms and light weapons and major conventional arms. So conventional arms would pertain to the arms that you see that are used in warfare. So tanks, fighter jets, aside from the like guns and ammunitions. There are international frameworks and treaties on arms and weapons. So this is the inexhaustive list. So in 2001, we have the UN Program of Action to Prevent, Combat, and Eradicate the Illicit Trade in Small Arms and Light Weapons, or the UNPOA. In 2005, we have the International Tracing Instrument. In 2014, we have the Arms Trade Treaty was ratified, and currently ongoing right now is an open-ended working group on conventional ammunition. So what does all of this mean? So first, the UN Program of Action, or UNPOA, because it's a very long program, in 2001, all UN member states, so all countries who are part of the UN, committed to this mechanism. Some fast facts about the UNPOA: it's non-binding, meaning it's not illegal, it's not international law, and it's based on the commitments of the countries to this agenda. The final outcome document, which for example outlines the key priorities in terms of the prevention, combating, and eradication of the illicit trade of small arms and light weapons. So that final outcome document is on a consensus basis, meaning all countries have to agree on this outcome document. And the Philippines is an active active member state in this space, and it actually chaired the 8th BMS in 2022. So I'll just come back. So every 2 years, a biennial meeting of states, so the BMS, and every 6 years, a review conference is held at the UN headquarters. So these two meetings aim to review progress made in the implementation of the POA and the International Tracing Instrument. Again, going back on the consensus basis for the outcome document, this means that the final document, which is the outcome of various meetings and conferences related to this framework, is adopted through agreement by all member states rather than a vote. So I've witnessed, for example, contentious debates between Ukraine and Russia in 2022 because of a certain term, a certain sentence that was included in the outcome document. So usually meetings would go on until midnight for them to agree on this, and it's really on a commitment basis. So no one is it doesn't bite, like it has the teeth but it doesn't bite in terms for the POA. But again, it's a normative framework. So the more countries commit to this, the more it's accepted, internationally accepted. And on the next one is the International Tracing Instrument. It's also a non-binding international framework adopted in 2025 to facilitate the identification and tracing of illicit small arms and light weapons. So it's more of tracing, maintaining records. So it aims to help states ensure that weapons are marked properly, there are records maintained, and they cooperate in tracing efforts. Because again, the illicit trade of firearms is a very big issue. And the ITI is a crucial component under the UN Program of Action on Small Arms. So again, it aims to prevent and combat the illicit trade, small arms, and light weapons. And the third is the Arms Trade Treaty. So the ATT is an international treaty that regulates the international trade in conventional arms, aiming to prevent and eradicate illicit arms trade and diversion. So it entered into force in December 2014. It's legally binding, so it's international law. So we have 116 state parties, which means these countries, these member states have committed themselves to the Arms Trade Treaty. And we have 26 signatories. So signatories would pertain to countries that have signed their vote of confidence, but they're not yet legally obligated to implement the treaty. At the heart of the ATT is the obligation on countries that have joined, so the state parties, to make an assessment of how weapons they want to transfer will be used. So they must determine if arms would commit or facilitate genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and serious human rights violation. And the ATT is the first time that human rights and humanitarian concerns have been so deeply integrated into a global arms control agreement. So it's shocking that it only took until 2014 for a global, like an international law, to actually take into account the human rights violations and humanitarian concerns related to the trade of arms. And Article 7.4 of the treaty includes text on gender, which was lobbied widely by civil society. So it actually requests that state parties in their export assessment, so when they send out weapons to a different country, that they have to take into account the risk of the arms to be used to commit or facilitate serious acts of gender-based violence or serious acts of violence against women and children. The Philippines ratified the treaty in 2022, being the 111th state party to the Arms Trade Treaty. And finally, on the open-ended working group on conventional ammunition, this group is tasked to elaborate a set of political commitments as a new global framework that will address existing gaps in through-life ammunition management. Why is this important? Why is the discussion of ammunition important? A firearm cannot be used without proper ammunition. So without ammunition, a firearm is just a useless piece of metal. So ammunition is fundamental to all firearms to be used, and it has a pivotal role in the safe operability of the firearm in question and its effectiveness. That's why right now a lot of campaigners are driving its attention towards regulating ammunition. And I want to emphasize, for a lot of the four frameworks and treaties that I've shared, none of them are on disarmament, because on conventional weapons, small arms, and light weapons, there are no treaties, there are no normative frameworks towards the complete eradication of these weapons, because um uh of the right of countries to protect themselves. So a lot of when you talk about conventional arms and small arms and light weapons, treaties and frameworks focus on arms control, regulatory. So most of these treaties are regulating, regulatory in nature. Next. Some intersecting issues on small arms and light weapons would be the gendered impact of arm transfers and the illegal arms trade, emerging technology, and youth and disarmament. So these three topics were actually cited by IANSA Asia Pacific members as the emerging priorities in the region, because these are the three issues that um, are in close contact or are affected widely by small arms and light weapons. So first off, on gender and small arms and light weapons, so there is a disproportionate impact of armed violence, and it cannot be ignored. Armed violence, including small arms proliferation, continues to impact women and children. So women and girls are often targeted with gender-based violence and face severe consequences in conflict situations, including loss of education and economic independence. As cited by the UN RCPD, Regional Center in Asia and the Pacific, under the UN Office of Disarmament Affairs, gender-related killings of women and girls estimate that globally almost 90,000 women and girls were killed intentionally in 2022, and almost the majority of these killings were gender motivated, with 50,000 women and girls worldwide killed by intimate partners or family members. On emerging technology, uh, technological impact, advancement in small arms such as 3D printing, polymer components, and modular designs have already existed over a decade. However, the challenge that new technology poses and the potential benefits they may present remain largely unexplored and limited. So there's not a lot of information about how technology is being used in relation to the production of small arms and light weapons. Many small arms and their essential part produced using new technologies are by default illicit, as if they fall outside government control. So we have here the the issues where people can print guns using a 3D printer in their homes, and that's automatically an illicit firearm. And the rapid evolution of technology is also creating new gaps in national control systems. So this is like the monitoring system of governments, which challenges member states, so our governments, to continuously update their legal and policy framework surrounding arms production. And lastly, on youth and disarmament, which I think would be of interest for a lot of the participants today, young people are crucial players in global disarmament efforts. So they bring fresh perspective, innovative strategies, and grassroots mobilization skills. Many young people suffer actually from direct violence, forced recruitment, displacement, and loss of opportunities due to armed conflict and small arms proliferation. And young people are both victims and at times perpetrators, often recruited into armed groups or caught in the crossfire of violence. Armed violence erodes young people's prospects for a secure and productive future by limiting access to education, employment, and social services. So there are a number of international policy frameworks dedicated to support young people's participation in disarmament. So the UN Security Council has passed the Youth Peace and Security Agenda, for example, which I know Gen Peace is working actively on, where Ate Bev is also active and she takes lead on that. The UN Secretary General also released an agenda for disarmament, which includes programs, for example, for UN Youth Champions for disarmament, UN Youth Leaders Fund for a World Without Nuclear Weapons, Youth for Disarmament, and various fellowships. However, the spaces for young people to engage in discussion, decision-making positions remain very limited for young people. So what we see often in the room when you talk about disarmament, when you talk about arms control, are old white men discussing amongst themselves and making decisions among themselves. So what can we do if that's the reality? One, we need to engage in multi-stakeholder advocacy and campaigns. So multi-stakeholder means not only not because this means it's just a security issue. We only talk to security representatives. Actually, a lot of us can engage in these discussions. And as you can see, these are engagements by the Center for Peace Education, the national campaigns. In 2019, I actually briefed the tricycle drivers in Katipunan about the small arms and light weapons, the issue of small arms, and asked them to put a sticker in their tricycles where it says barya lang po, hindi bala. So things like that. These are fun ways to raise awareness. If you don't know, it makes you Google, what is this about? What sticker is this about? What campaign is this about? So things like this are examples of what we have. And on the right are the international campaigns by IANSA, where the Philippines is part of. So it's mostly social media campaigns. So we have like gun-free Valentines, because again, a lot of armed violence is fueled by intimate partner relationships. We have the 13 days of action against gun violence. We also have Twitter campaigns. We have this a lot. So for example, when you wear orange, because orange is the color to remember gun victim survivors and gun violence victims. So CP has also done a lot of this in the past, social media campaigns, asking people to give their testimonies, young people, what they think about why, arms control and the regulation of the arms trade is valuable to young people like us. Um, Inclusion of the issue of illicit arms in peace efforts. So if there's opportunities to talk about peace building, consider including arms, how illicit arms trade or the illicit distribution of arms affect or have a wider impact, not just killing, but actually, for example, again, impeding economic opportunities, educational opportunities. And at national level, the inclusion of armed conflict in national policy. So for example, the National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security. And lastly, in lobbying and international engagement. So CP is actually quite active in terms of lobbying with government offices in the country. You can see here in the lower right to the left, that's the Office of the Special Envoy on Transnational Crime. They are the ones in charge in submitting the reports to the UNPOA and ATT. So constant show of support from civil society like us, to let them know that we're here to support them. If they need data, we can provide data if we have that, or we can reach communities if they need human stories of how gun violence and arms trade impact communities at the grassroots level. And on the right side is our participation to the Arms Trade Treaty. So I had the honor of delivering the opening statement during the ninth Conference of State Parties, emphasizing how the arms trade impacts our region, specifically in Asia and the Pacific. So with that, I will end my presentation here. Thank you so much for your attention, and I'll give the floor back to Dr. Gail. Thank you.
Hi, Bianca. So there was a reaction here, no? Parang it says here that it seems that the small arms is so easy to obtain. And why is this so? Would you know if, kasi siguro maraming psych majors dito, do they
Mm.
actually take a psychological test
Mm.
before they get own a gun?
Yes. Thank you for that, Dr. Gail. So I think just to piggyback also what Ate Beb said, a lot of the arms that are in circulation are usually remnants of war. Um, we have porous borders here in the Philippines, so it's so easy for for shipments to come in the Philippines. So for example, in the Arms Trade Treaty, before the Philippines signed, they actually they had to engage the Bureau of Customs in training their personnel in terms of how to identify packages coming in, because it's easy to obtain a small arm, a light weapon, a small arm, a gun, for example, but you can actually buy parts and components and be the one to actually build this
Put them
weapon.
all
You can open
together.
on YouTube. Yes, yes. So it's very the life cycle of an arm of a gun is also widely available online. And in terms of like the psychological test, there is an exam before you can get your license, but then like all other exams, it's so easy to fake a test. And you can just submit it. Um and well, a lot of people have illicit firearms anyway, so there's still a lot of arms that are unregistered, especially I would say especially in very vulnerable, politically charged communities where there are huge political dynasties. You see a lot of arms flow there. I'll end there. I think we can discuss a bit more in the Q&A.
Okay.
It's nice.
Thank you, Bianca. That's very interesting, no? So for the psych majors here, if you're asked to write a certification for someone to own the gun, be sure that you administered the test properly. Okay. So that's your responsibility. All right. So now I would like to call on another Bianca, Miss Bianca Reyes.
Hello, hi everyone. I hope you can see my presentation and I hope you can hear me properly. Okay.
Okay, Bianca, we can see your presentation.
Yeah.
It's there already. And if you
Okay.
could speak a little bit louder, that would be better. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Oops. Oh, sorry. Wait. Okay, hello everybody. Good afternoon. So I will be discussing nuclear weapons and treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons on behalf of Dr. Castro. So she basically supplied the content of this um, presentation. Okay. Just a quick overview of the WMD treaties. So first of all, we have the Biological Weapons Convention that entered into force in 1975. Then secondly, we have the Chemical Weapons Convention that entered into force in 1997. And third, we have the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons that entered into force in 2021 after getting 50 signatories per the treaty's provision. Oops. Okay. Okay. So basically, as everybody is probably aware that nuclear weapons were first developed during the Second World War, and it was first used in Hiroshima and Nagasaki on August 1945. where the bombs were dropped as a means to get Japan to fully surrender. Or actually, Japan already surrendered, but the US wanted to assert their power. And since then, nuclear disarmament efforts have emerged because of the resulting deaths and destruction. So, as a result of this, the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons was passed in 1968. So, I would just like to share with you some data from ICANN. So, as of the moment, there are actually 12,512 nuclear warheads in the world, and at present, there are 9 countries in the world that possesses nuclear weapons, and they are Russia, which has the most, followed by the United States, then China, France, the United Kingdom, Pakistan, India, Israel, and North Korea. So these states altogether roughly have around 12,500 warheads, with over 9,500 in active military stockpiles. So while this is a significant decline from the approximately 70,000 warheads owned by the nuclear-armed states during the Cold War, nuclear arsenals are expected to grow over the coming decade, and today's forces are vastly more capable. So basically, to abolish nuclear weapons, the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons was started in 2007. Under ICANN's leadership, the TPNW was negotiated in the UN last July 2017 with 122 member states approving the treaty. The Philippines was one of them, and all 9 nuclear-armed states voted no. For this achievement, ICANN received the Nobel Peace Prize in 2017. So, why is this treaty important? Nuclear weapons are weapons of mass destruction. They go against the very root of our spiritual and ethical beliefs, which is respect for human life and for creation. The weapons are so powerful that they put at risk the very survival of the human community and planet, and planet Earth and the rest of creation. And thirdly, their effects are catastrophic and therefore unacceptable. They go against international humanitarian principles. So the late Pope Francis was actually a staunch critic of nuclear weapons, and he said that spending on nuclear weapons squanders the wealth of nations. To prioritize such spending is a mistake and a misallocation of resources which would be far better invested in education, health, and fight against extreme poverty. The poor and the weak pay the price. It says here that over $387 billion were spent by the 9 nuclear armed states for maintaining nuclear weapons in the last 5 years. So we could only imagine how much money could have been invested instead in education, healthcare, and to address extreme poverty. Nuclear weapons have also been declared immoral weapons, not only by the Catholic Church, but also by the World Council of Churches and Religions for Peace. So, what are the major provisions of the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons? So, the treaty prohibits nations from developing, testing, producing, manufacturing, transferring, possessing, stockpiling, using, or threatening to use nuclear weapons. And nations must not allow nuclear weapons to be stationed or deployed in their territory. So these are 2 major provisions that you should remember about the TPNW. So here's an update on the treaty. So far 94 states have signed, but only 73 states have ratified the treaty. To ratify an international treaty means to integrate it into their domestic law. So only 73 states were able to do this. And a big challenge still remains for us in the wider global community. The nuclear armed states continue to resist the TPNW, and so the threat of using nuclear weapons in the event of a wider war still remains. So, with this challenge in mind, let us continue the fight to end nuclear weapons and to fight and to address violence through peaceful means. So, thank you everyone for listening, and that's it for my presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Bianca. And maybe just to inform everybody that the Center for Peace Education is very, very active and always commemorating the anniversary of the Hiroshima and the Nagasaki um, nuclear bomb. And usually we do that in August. And for August, we want everybody to save the date, August 29, right? Something is happening. We are going to have a special guest and we'll make sure to invite you. And don't miss that because sometimes it's very rare that we get to really listen to first account stories of people who have been victims of nuclear weapons. Thank you very much, Bianca. And now we would like to call on our last speaker. So we would like to call on Miss Mirma Tika Ortiz. Hi, Mirma.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. It's so nice to see many familiar faces in the space of peace and security and disarmament. I wish we could all be in one room together, but thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you also to my students who are also here. And I see a lot of other students from, I think, the high school and from schools outside Metro Manila. Just a quick check-in. Where are you all tuning in today? Can you just type in the chat box like where are you now? Are you in Quezon City, in Makati? So just I know. Okay, so thanks, Bev. You are from Marikina. Okay. Go ahead and just type that in. Okay. So may isang galing Visayas, but mostly galing Rizal and NCR. So hello again. Hello again to everyone. So the title of my talk is A Shower of Destruction. What do cluster munitions really leave behind? And I'd like to just draw everyone's attention. I know that Bev and I have a very similar presentation because later on you find out that cluster munitions over time act as a landmine. Okay, so that's why you will find similarities with the presentation of Bev earlier in my presentation. So this is the title of my talk, A Shower of Destruction. What do cluster munitions leave behind? Okay, if we can go to the next one. There's a short video that I want everyone to see, and this will give us an overview or introduction, explaining what cluster munitions are. Let's play that video. Oh, there's no volume? There. Maraming salamat. Let's go to the next slide. Cluster munitions, ano ba yun? All right, type in the chat box what you remember from the video. Sige, ano ba yun? Ano ba ang cluster munitions? You can unmute yourself kung mas komportable ka, or you can also use the chat box if you'd like to type in your answer. Okay, I'll give you a few moments. All right, because my students are here, I would like to call on a volunteer. Ayan. I'd like to hear from Danica Haramila. Ano ba yung cluster munitions? Ano yung natandaan mo from the short video that we watched? Danica, go ahead. Danica, are you here? Anyone want to salo, Danica? How about Dominic? Dominic Policarpio.
Hi, Miss. Good afternoon po. So for me, sa pagkakaintindi ko po, cluster munitions are weapons na nagdi-disperse po ng small pero multiple na explosives po.
Ayan.
That's how I understood it po. Thank you po.
Okay. Thank you, Doms. Thank you. All right, if we could go to the next slide. Ito, these are some of the things that we need to remember when we talk about cluster munitions. So cluster munitions are weapons. You can see there are weapons that releases numerous small explosives called submunitions, or they're also called bomblets. Okay, so when they are launched, okay, they will then open up and release small bomblets. They can be released from the air or from the land. So it is designed to explode on impact, but sadly, oftentimes they don't explode at all and they act as a landmine, and it becomes very dangerous for civilians because these weapons do not discriminate. They don't know whether they are landing on civilians, on homes, schools, hospitals. They don't know that. So it it becomes a very dangerous weapon that has long-lasting effects. So just to give more of some terms that all of us need to remember, there are three things that I'd like for you to remember. If we could go to the next slide. So the terms to remember is that number one, container or dispenser. What is a container or dispenser? This is the main body of the cluster munition. Typically a hollow shell or a thin-walled canister designed to be dropped from the air or fired from the ground. Submunitions or bomblets. These are small explosive devices contained within a container, and a UXO or unexploded ordnance are bomblets or submunitions that have failed to detonate or explode on impact. And this can even explode without warning. It could explode because of the wind, dust, a cattle stepping on it, a child picking it up, as mentioned by Bev earlier. So these are just some of the terms that we need to remember. Next slide, please. So when and where have cluster munitions been used? And just very quickly, if we go to the next slide. Oh, sorry. Let's go to the producers and stockpilers of cluster munitions. So the producers are these countries and Russia. So we see here the producers and stockpilers. So for producers, we have Russia, China, the United States, Brazil, India, Iran, Israel, Myanmar, South Korea, Egypt, Greece, Pakistan, Poland, Romania, Singapore, Turkey, and North Korea. Stockpilers include Brazil, Chile, sorry, that's supposed to be Peru. That's a typo. The US. This is not a complete list because it is also very hard to get the accurate or the most honest data. Okay, next slide. So historical data on the use of cluster munitions, and I think Bev was able to touch on this earlier, but there are at least 21 states and 4 areas in Africa, the Middle East, Asia, and Europe affected by cluster munitions or have been in the last 5 decades. The widespread use of cluster munitions creates lethal hazard for the population, and its effect is long lasting. So, for example, even the 11-week conflict in Kosovo in 1999 have served, it has a large impact because of the extensive use of cluster munitions. There were a total of 230 to 290,000 submunitions were dropped in that 11-week period. And many of these fell on homes, fell on agricultural land, field, forests, and vineyards that to date is very hard for people to use and access. So the clearing operation continues. Next slide, please. So in World War, historically, when we look at it, cluster munitions were used in World War II and the Cold War, where cluster munitions were developed and used extensively during these periods. In Southeast Asia from the 1960s to the 1970s, the US used cluster munitions in their carpet bombing escapades in Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, leading to a significant number of unexploded submunitions and many civilian casualties. In the Persian Gulf in 1999, cluster munitions were also used in Iraq, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia. Moving forward, cluster munitions were also used in 1999 in the former Yugoslavia. The US used cluster munitions in Siberia, Montenegro, and Kosovo. In Afghanistan, from 2001 to 2002, the US dropped a significant number of cluster munitions in Afghanistan, in Iraq in 2003, in Yemen in 2009, and in Azerbaijan in 2020 during the fight between the Azerbaijan and Armenian and the de facto authorities in Nagorno-Karabakh. So those are some historical data on the use of cluster munitions. Now, have cluster munitions been used in recent years? And the answer is yes. Okay, if we move to the next slide, the answer is yes. In fact, it's been used in Russia and Ukraine. It was first Russia who used it starting in 2022 and is still using it to present. And Myanmar, there's also a report of Myanmar using it, and also Syria. So, and this is a very sad reality. If we look at it, there are state parties to the convention, but there are also state parties who have withdrew from the convention. And if we go to the next slide, I'd like to just shed a bit of light on, what is happening. So in 2023, the U.S. Department of Defense announced that President Joe Biden, by the way, the United States has never ratified the Convention on Cluster Munition, but he had signed a determination that the transfer of cluster munition to Ukraine was necessary for the national security interests of the United States. So he authorized the transfer of unspecific number of cluster munitions that have a greater than 1% unexploded ordnance rate to the Ukrainian armed forces. So this is a sad reality. There should be no space in this world for such inhumane weapon. So, and it's just very sad that the United States still continue to use it as a weapon of choice, to protect their own national interest. Next, please. So, countries that have that are contaminated by UXOs are the following. So, Laos still suffered from extensive contamination during the Vietnam War. There are still millions of unexploded submunitions that remain. The picture in the slide, you will see a man in a wheelchair. He is actually one of the leading survivors who have survived an explosion. He was actually an agricultural worker. He was working in his rice field, and he accidentally, when he was plowing his land, he accidentally hit a cluster bomb that had permanently damaged his body, and he has lost both of his legs. And here he is helping the Cambodian clearing team in this operation. So both Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam are severely affected. Lebanon is still contaminated. There are many parts of Lebanon contaminated, also in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria. Moving forward, so other countries that we probably do not hear about, but if we go to the next slide, Yemen, the ongoing conflict has resulted in the widespread of its contamination. Ukraine also. Bianca, if we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So Ukraine, Azerbaijan, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Croatia, Kosovo, and Serbia. These are countries contaminated by UXOs to date. So why do we talk about, why do we talk about these countries, or why do we talk about, why is it important for us to talk about the effects of cluster munitions? There's a short video that I'd like for everyone to watch, and it's in the next slide. So if I could just bring everyone's attention to this video.
A cluster munition is a weapon which is either dropped from the air or launched from the ground and releases many smaller explosive submunitions in flight. These submunitions are designed to explode on impact, to attack enemy soldiers, infrastructure, or light vehicles. Cluster munitions release many small bomblets over a wide area. One strike can hit an area as big as a football field and release several hundred bomblets. Cluster munitions are unacceptable because they impact a wide area and are unable to distinguish between civilians and combatants. 94% of recorded cluster munitions casualties are civilians, of which almost 40% are children. Up to 1/3 of all bomblets fail to explode upon impact. These unexploded submunitions continue to kill and maim civilians long after the conflict has ended. The contamination means that people are unable to access and use their land or to move freely. It also obstructs the economy and social development of affected communities for decades. Due to the sheer number of bomblets, clearance is very costly and time-consuming. Also, their small size and interesting appearance is attractive to children, who often mistake them for toys. Cluster munitions were not forbidden until the Convention on Cluster Munitions in 2008. The convention prohibits the use, production, transfer, and stockpiling of cluster munitions for those nations that ratify it. It also ensures adequate assistance to survivors and their communities, clearance of contaminated areas, risk education, and destruction of existing stockpiles. To date, 108 states have become states parties. Many more years of work will be necessary to clear all the remaining cluster munition remnants in contaminated states and allow affected communities to live safely and to thrive. This is why Switzerland and the GICHD are committed to this cause and support mine action activities in many countries around the world.
Thank you, Bianca. So just to give emphasis, the use of cluster munitions is unacceptable. Yeah, we can go to. The use of cluster munition is unacceptable. Its impact widespread, and they are unable to distinguish between combatants and civilians. Its use is against human rights and the international humanitarian law. 1/3 of bomblets fail to explode on impact, posing long-time effects, making land inaccessible and movements limited. So 94% of civilians, And 40%, which is an alarming number, are children, are the victims because of its interesting shape and color, as given emphasis in the video. So this impedes development. So if communities don't have access to the land, if they do not have access to areas, this impedes development, posing multiple economic burden on the communities and the state. Victims are left with very little assistance to live a decent life. So they are not just, they're not just victims, um, they're not just survivors, but they're also carrying this multiple burden because they cannot contribute meaningfully to society. So the Cluster Munitions Convention, or the Convention on Cluster Munition, this came about in 2008, and it was like an international movement, an international ban on the cluster munitions. The Cluster Munition Convention prohibits the use, production, stockpiling, and transferring of cluster munitions for state parties to the convention. Provisions and support for clearance operations of contaminated areas is also detailed in the convention. Destruction of existing stockpile is mandated by the convention. There are also risk education. So especially for countries who are contaminated by cluster munitions, they include risk education into the existing curriculum. So they have their own Department of Education, and that is included so that they can inform children, they can inform farmers, rural workers, on the risk of cluster munitions. Just on the next slide, this also ensures, the convention also ensures states who have signed and ratified to provide assistance to survivors and their communities. And on the next slide, under Article 5 of the convention, these are states obligated to provide assistance to victim survivors within their jurisdiction of control. So there are 11 countries, and many of these countries, if you notice, are developing countries. And therefore, they seek cooperation for much more developed countries and international NGOs to help them ensure that they are able to provide assistance to victims and the survivors and their communities. Next slide, please. So the Convention on Cluster Munition entered into force in August 2010. There are a total of 111 states that have ratified, 12 states that have just signed on to the convention. So this is just a summary. And sadly, just this year, a few weeks ago, last month, Lithuania withdrew in March 6th, 2025, because of security concerns in the context of the Russian aggression. So this is a current reality. This weapon should be obsolete, right? No country should be using it. And yet it's still posing such a great threat to humanity as we speak. So what is the stance of the Philippines? Where are we? So the good news is the Philippines signed the Convention on Cluster Munitions in 2008, and it took 11 years for the Philippines to ratify. It took some time because of internal dialogue, internal negotiations, but we were able to ratify it in 2009. Now, the Philippines views the Cluster Munitions Convention as a crucial tool for humanitarian disarmament, recognizing the devastating effect. The Philippines has never produced, used, or had any stockpile, but cannot confirm or deny whether cluster munitions have entered into the country through the Visiting Forces Agreement with the United States. At the Asia Pacific region, we are actually taking leadership in actively promoting the universalization of the Cluster Munitions Convention. We've led the DFA's 2025 intersessional meetings on this, and we've hosted regional workshops to promote the Cluster Munitions Convention. So just some milestones. Where are we now in terms of clearing operations? The good news is a total of 185.3 square kilometers of cluster munitions contaminated areas have been cleared. So Bosnia and Herzegovina have completely cleared their area, becoming the 14th state to do so since 2010. Lao PDR has destroyed the most submunitions, but operations to clear many rural areas still continue. Peru's destruction of stockpiles was completed in 2023. So these are milestones that we want to highlight. And there are so many more efforts, especially, and I want to highlight also the efforts of organizations, institutions, and coalitions who are key players. And if we can go to the next slide. So, for example, the International Campaign to Ban Landmines and the Cluster Munitions Coalition, where the Center for Peace Education is part of, and the Guzon Z. Ortigas Peace Institute is part of, has made significant strides when it comes to lobbying governments, talking to our own governments with regards to our action to either sign or ratify towards the universalization of the Cluster Munitions Convention. There are also groups like Mine Action Canada, Human Rights Watch, who are so active in research, in monitoring, and in awareness raising. And if you just search the things that they do, it's so amazing and it's so inspiring to see how civil society and think tanks have worked together to get information across about cluster munitions. COPE Laos is a wonderful organization that's offering victim assistance together with the International Committee of the Red Cross. They provide special funding for those who have been harmed by cluster munitions, including Handicap International, the Landmine Survivors Network, and Medico International. So I just want to bring everyone's attention to this picture. This was a picture that was this is a picture. If can you just guess where this is? Okay, please type in the chat box. Okay, please type in the chat box where you think this photo was taken. Go ahead, anybody? Sorry, wala akong GCash. Tama ka, Jamila. All right, sorry, walang GCash. But yes, thank you. That's correct. Miriam College. So this was way before we had the Innovation Center. So this was actually in front of where the Innovation Center is. So Miriam College, when the Philippines has not yet ratified the Cluster Munitions Convention, we were so active in lobbying both the Senate and Congress so that they could ratify. So this was one of the actions that we took as an institution. And this is a very proud moment for me as a former student and now a member of the community as faculty. So when we talk about, disarmament issues, whether it is cluster munitions, landmines, small arms, nuclear weapons, the Center for Peace Education and our other advocacy centers have really come together to support this very important cause. So with that, what is our call to action? Number one, whether it is so far away from us, it is always important to recognize that this is a problem. And when we recognize that this is a problem, we need to also educate ourselves. This is the link that I'm sharing here on screen. This is a monitor report with regards to the cluster munitions status. This was published in 2024. And it's such a wonderful resource. It's so easy to read. It's so easy to digest. And it's just a wonderful resource where we can start and educate ourselves. There are also numerous videos online on YouTube. And the organizations that I've mentioned in the past have also published articles and videos to help us educate ourselves. Next, of course, when we educate ourselves, we want to share that, right? We want to talk about it. We want to be able to raise people's awareness. Na parang, porket, it's not just because it's far away from us, it doesn't mean that we can't care about it. We need to really care about this issue because it is a humanitarian issue. So we can use our social media pages to talk about it, to write about it, and find like-minded individuals and join collective actions. Monitor the developments, just talk about it, and call for accountability of the government, and and really be part of the growing action to ban cluster munitions. So with that, I just like to close with this song. People may think that it this is such a far-fetched thing to even dream about, but just this line from the song Imagine, it goes, "You may say that I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope you will join us and make the world as fun." So maraming salamat, and I'm open to questions if there are. I know that we're a little bit
Hi.
we've already extended. So thank you, Dr. Gail.
Thank you, Mirma. That was so interesting. Okay, because we're moving in already to the question and answer now, I'd like to thank the four speakers. Maybe I put in the question already for you. So what are the challenges in trying to clear or to detonate or clear the unexploded
Or
ordnance? Yeah,
yeah,
and how
well,
long will that take?
okay, so there is an internal goal. Para 2030 ata yung internal goal to finish the clearing operations. But really, because it's tedious, like you can't just expect a machine to clear kasi it will explode, di ba? So the work is so tedious. Like I have been to a clearing camp both in Laos and Cambodia where people have to walk very slow using a metal detector, a bomb detector. And when they actually find it, they have to unearth it, carefully. And people are actually risking their lives. No machine can do the clearing operations as we speak. And that's why one of the challenges is, number one, aside from funding and advancements in technology to make it faster, one of the challenges that because there are also very few people who will risk their lives to the clearing operation. So many of these lands, especially in Laos and Cambodia and Vietnam, are unusable. Um, and it's just become, like a, a land that's, sayang siya. It could have contributed to the economic
Okay.
development.
So, in Mirma, if that's cleared already, where do you put the material
Oh
that is
yes.
taken that will not harm the environment?
Right. So they have a way to, so when they get the bomb, they have a way to detonate it safely away from people. So that in itself is also a risk, right? Because the movement, anytime, it could be just the wind. So that is also a risk. But they do have a safe place, a safe space where they detonate the bombs. The
Okay,
bomblets rather. Yeah.
thank you, Mirma. Okay, I have a question for Miss Bev. How can landmines disrupt the ecosystems? It's somehow related, but how can landmines disrupt the ecosystem in your view?
So just like sa cluster bombs, how landmines erupts, it really disrupts soil layers. So yung mga essential minerals na nagsusupport sana sa growth ng mga plants and trees, nawawala siya. And plus, yung sobrang contaminated and toxic chemicals, composition ng cluster munitions, ng landmines, it really contaminates the water and the land. And dahil barren land talaga, if you go to Cambodia, you'll see really hectares of barren land. So dried up land, no minerals, no animals. So di ba yung mga cross-pollination, it doesn't happen. And then yun siya, yung water retention issues, dahil sobrang dry siya, we usually farmers helps in cultivating lands and it doesn't happen because of the dangers. Yun
Okay,
siya.
so that's why it cannot be used anymore for agriculture because it's contaminated, and then we will end up eating it and we will be poisoned.
Mm,
Is that the idea?
yes.
And maybe it will take many, many, many years before you're able to cultivate that land again.
Yes.
Okay, that's really bad. Okay. Um, Bianca P. Okay, Bianca, this is interesting. Do you think mall security guards or even school guards should carry weapons?
I think that's a very, I don't know. Um, that's a good question. Well, first off, if they do carry weapons, it has to be registered. I think at least that's the minimum requirement, and that they should be properly trained how to handle that weapon and when to use it. If there's like a certain circumstance. But I really think it depends on like the private institution because a lot of things would affect why you would need a firearm. So it could be the location of the place has like it's like known to have a lot of like for example holdups in that area, or it's a pretty insecure place, a lot of foot traffic. But personally on my end, other countries are quite successful with like a gun-free security system. Um, I just don't know if it's applicable in the Philippines. I think again there's a lot of parts to that. But I think security, for example, private security systems, they're included in like the exception to the rule of our Republic Act also because they're not technically part of the police, right? So see, those are again like a lot of the loopholes in our laws
Yes.
on conventional arms. Yeah. Over. Thank you.
So maybe more policies on that one. Okay. Bianca Reyes. Okay, what are some practical ways to raise awareness on the dangers of nuclear weapons?
Okay, so thank you for that question, Dr. Gail. So here at the Center for Peace Education, as you mentioned, we commemorate what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki every year. So last year we had a exhibit and an opening, and then the year prior we were able to have a talk with the Hibakusha, which is a survivor of the nuclear attacks in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. So there are still, I believe, a handful of hibakushas that are still alive. However, they are very, very old. So it's very, if you have the chance or the opportunity, it's very good if you are able to hear their stories. And I believe there are also lots of materials online that are able to capture what happened back then. And a lot of these hibakushas are advocates against nuclear weapons. So it's important as well that we put victims at the forefront so that we can really hone in this narrative as to why nuclear weapons are extremely destructive. And also, you should remind people that until now, nuclear weapons are still being proliferated, especially from these large powerful countries, and it's kind of scary to think about. So, and another thing why nuclear weapons are so destructive is because they do not discriminate. Anybody and everything that
Yes.
touches um that's being enveloped in the mushroom will be affected. So
Yes.
it's
Yes.
really an
There's even
existential.
a movie in Netflix. It's Twice. He
Mm,
he got he was a victim of the bombing in both Nagasaki, and then he wanted to, I think, warn people in Hiroshima. So when he went there, tapos na bomb naman yun. Or was it the other way around? But he was victim twice. That's why the movie is called Twice. Okay, so thank you for that. Miss Bev is saying here that if you watch Iron Man, the Jericho missile was actually a cluster munition. And if you go to in Cambodia, there's a center there for survivors of landmines cluster munitions. Or there's also a Cambodia Siem Reap Landmine Museum. Just like if you go to Nagasaki or Hiroshima, you will also see a museum. All right. And you will see there a clock that actually stopped at the time that the bomb exploded. Okay. So now I think we'd like to hear from our students. So can we call some students? Julian Duyala from the HEU. Can you unmute, please? And you ask your question, or you can give your own reaction.
Good afternoon po. Ay, good evening. Can I be heard po?
Yes.
My reaction po for the speakers po. So the first speaker, they discuss the landmines po, which highlighting not only the devastating humanitarian consequences, but also their long-term environmental damage. And I think po it's nice that they highlighted it since people often forget or overlook the environmental aspect that it can include soil contamination, habitat destruction, and I think po to address this, a call to action is to integrate community engagement and empowerment. So it would be nice then po to partner with, I guess, environmental NGOs and advocacy for this po. And with ano din po, small arms and weapons, I think po it is a great example of centered power because since they are small, they can still be they can cause a lot of damage. So their portability and accessibility, it increases the potential for widespread harm. And this action it affects a lot of people. So it is critical to be a good steward so that the violence doesn't turn into a social crisis. Overall po, unwillingness for disarmament or nonviolence, it carries a devastating human toll. And while security is a necessity, clinging to weapons po, it just perpetuates a cycle where humanity gambles its survival for fleeting protection. So the bombs, they destroy cities and stored weapons. It take away from resources that could be used to fight hunger and so yeah. As for my question po, I guess I like to ask po, are there situations where advocating for non-violence was particularly challenging, and how did you navigate those moments po? Thank you po.
Thank you. Thank you, Julian. So would anyone like to answer that? So in your work, parang did people say, no, we need nuclear bombs or we need nuclear weapons so that there would be peace. We have to prepare for war. What's your reaction to that kind of statement? Or how would you respond? Let's say our students were put on that spot. Di kailangan natin ng mga baril kasi syempre you want to protect yourself. Diba? Psychologically, you want it, let's say, there. But hindi naman gagamitin. So how can they respond to that? Yes, Miss Bev.
Yeah, okay. Reflecting back to our experience when we were doing advocacy for the adoption of the Arms Trade Treaty, madaming barriers or challenging din to advocate for stricter trading because you're facing political interests, business interests, but eventually we engage stakeholders in the context ng humanitarian protection and respect for human rights. And criminality is very rampant. For example, in the Philippines, criminality and then yung armed conflict in Mindanao is causing harm to the people. Medyo kailangan mo makita yung side, the human side of what we are doing, touching the emotional side of people to understand that this is doing more harm than good to our people. So, ganun siya. Ganun din. Actually, sa question ni, anong name niya?
Julian.
Julian, it's doing advocacy work in disarmament, particularly what is being utilized in our country is quite hard dahil ang daming oppositions, ang daming mga kontra, but when you talk to them heart to heart and present the impact, the bigger impact of this in our society, you'll be touching a bit of their softer side and humane side. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So she adds nga, she wants to say na real security doesn't come from destroying each other, but from being brave enough to pick peace or to choose peace over power and life over weapons. Very beautifully said.
Ganda. So I want to add, yeah,
Yes,
just one, I
yes,
want to add
Irma.
to that. I think it's important to also ask their context. You know, sometimes people think that carrying a gun or it's okay for countries to have, you know, these weapons. But I think we have to understand context and first connect to the human in order for us to be able to to get through. Sometimes kasi when we come up as very defensive and no, according to according to stats, there is a 15% increase when people have that this firearm would be used on individuals within the household. So instead of going or addressing it strongly, we have to, I think, connect first and then answer and then give our piece like what Juliana said here, which is very beautiful.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. Oh, I'd like to acknowledge Miss Deng Gikianto. She's in our audience, and she also made some comments nga that the question posed a huge dilemma in the past at NDU on armed security guards while having a peace center. Hi, Miss Deng. Okay. So let's call in more students, maybe from the high school. Um, from our high school, anyone? Gianna, Miranda, Gianna, are you there? Or this is Gianna. Gianna, please unmute. Or eto, sige, si March na lang. March Procopio. March?
Hello po. I'll just be
Hi.
sharing my reactions.
Your reaction. Okay.
Okay, so in terms of arms control po, I realized that we need innovative and forward-thinking approaches not just to regulate current access to weapons, but to establish new global mechanisms that proactively prevent conflict and then to address the root causes of violence and counterterrorism in sustainable ways. This includes confronting like the systemic abuse of power, the horrors of EJK, and the unchecked militarization of state forces. Disarmament must go hand in hand with the protection of human rights and the pursuit of accountability from those in power. And through the devastating bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they remain as one of the history's most painful reminders of the consequences of nuclear warfare. So the loss of over 200,000 lives, the long-term suffering of survivors, and the complete destruction of entire communities. They serve as a permanent warning of what happens when humanity chooses war over peace. These tragedies should fuel our commitment as a collective to ensure that such atrocities are never repeated. And that all throughout that peace isn't just the absence of war, and it's the presence of justice, equity, and dignity. And that we should prioritize the safety and humanity of people, and especially the youth as members of high school right now. We should pave the way for a future where no generation has to live in fear of bombs, bullets, or violence. And through a peaceful world is possible, but only if we build it like deliberately talaga po and courageously together. And to sum it all up, in the discussion of nuclear weapons, we must remember that these are not merely conventional arms, but they represent an existential threat to all humanity. That resources that are allocated to maintain the modernization of these instruments of destruction should be rather redirected towards sustainable development, education, and genuine security. Initiatives to address the root causes of conflict. Okay. All in all, we are in need of paradigm shift and invest in legal and judicial systems to ensure accountability and uphold the rule of law. Yun lang po for me.
Okay, thank you, March. So, March, are you a member of any organization or club in the high school?
Yes, po, I'm the president of Pax Christi for high school and the member of SAYA organization.
Okay. So, March, what do you think there should be more if you can invite people to become a member of the Pax Christi High School or Pax Christi HEU? What would you tell them? I mean, why is this important to you? Or why is this important at all?
To me po, it's important kasi we have to really emphasize on the fact that we are all people, and through the interactions that we have with our sister schools in Mindanao, we get to celebrate our collaborations with one another and to help them po through our initiatives and advocacies.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mark. So I hope your tribe will increase. So please continue to get more allies who will think like you. Okay. Gianna, did you want to add into to this one? I see you put something in the chat.
Sorry for not being able to respond when I was called
Oh, go
earlier.
ahead.
My
It's all right.
my mic settings weren't set up, unfortunately. For just to add on, I think what was said earlier was very already comprehensive by Marsh and the HU student earlier. I agree with what they said, and just to add on what I appreciated about the meeting, I'm very glad that the seminar held about disarmament was very comprehensive, especially since I was actually aware of the topic. But this taught me way more, especially about the suppliers of where cluster munitions come from and giving new perspectives on what cluster munitions and ammunition and landmines do, such as when it was mentioned earlier that they can actually stay dormant for a long time, and in later years they can actually be stumbled upon by children that may be effective and bombed, especially showing victims of um victims of what happened in the Philippines and in other countries. I think that was a very good perspective and way to tackle this and really inform people and somehow like teach empathy to others to really care about issues like this, especially since you don't really see the talk of war weapons being talked about. You always see the people, like the leaders, being talked about, but it's never what actually happens. And I think actually stopping the production of war weapons is more feasible than actually trying to sort of stop corruption, especially since they're in the world that people have so much power. But when you're talking about factories, when you're talking about companies, it's a lot more possible to go on strike for these companies, protest against them, and just sort of like stop them and advocate for laws that will actually help the production of war weapons, because after all, even though it's the people doing it, it's at the end of the day, when you have cluster munitions and landmines, it's the vessel that actually carries out the destruction. For ways that I just to add on ways that I think is stop it, aside from what was mentioned earlier, as I think it was already comprehensive, I also think it's possible to sort of I'm not sure if it was mentioned earlier because I joined a bit later, but the Convention on Cluster Munitions Treaty, I believe that's what it's called. I think if much stricter rules were adapted onto that treaty and it was more sort of pushed by the UN to have countries agree more to the contents of it, I believe it would actually really help in sort of stopping what all of these countries are doing. But yeah, that's just what I wanted to add. I'm very
Okay.
glad this seminar happened. I think it's really cool that Miriam has events like this.
Oh, thank you, Gianna, and thank you for staying. It's already dark, but you're still here, and most of you are still here. That's great. In the classroom level, how are you guys in the high school able to really promote peace? Do you have like mechanisms or things, systems in place so that peace can really be a focus?
For that, there's actually certain I believe it was mentioned earlier by Marge. She was a part of Saya, and one of the earlier events that happened with Saya was that they had Saya kits where you would donate school supplies and put them all, and gather all of them in these kits and give them to children in Mindanao. Of course, in Miriam, in class level, we also have our social action activities. In club level, in clubs, we also have that. I think that's a great way to promote peace. And aside from that, we also have positions like peace builder and I believe committees on discipline and
Great.
prayer. Those really help promote peace because you have people that are willing to spread the word of God, which is all about spreading peace. And you have also the committee on discipline. It just maintains order in the classroom. So even though it's really simple ways, I believe it's a great start because it instills in us that we should be obedient, and we should also be respectful to one another. It really starts from because school is where everything starts from, and I think what was mentioned earlier is a really good way to start.
Okay, thank you, Gianna. So you mentioned not just one way, but so many ways, and these are practical ways at the high school level. So that only means that even as a young, even young people like you can already do a lot. So thank you for that, Gianna. Okay. I saw a hand raised. Meron ba? Wait, sorry, I can't see. Can you unmute and
I think CJ raised her.
CJ.
I'm sorry, I really did not intend to raise my hand. But anyway, I would just like to add to what Miss Gianna said. I am also from the high school. I am a faculty there. Aside from having peace builders and also organizations, there is also an integration of it to our homeroom sessions. We do have modules that would talk about peace, concept of peace, such as whether um, ideas also, whether peace is just the absence of conflict or violence, things like that. Students were also asked to create outputs. Based on this, they would also give and also brainstorm their ideas to it as a group. So apart from those committees and also student officers and volunteers, we do also have modules where students can engage and also talk about concepts related to peace. Yes,
Oh,
thank you po.
thank you, Mrs. CJ. Thank you for that information. That is very important, no, to know what we have been doing as our efforts to for disarmament and peace in general and non-violence. Okay, so I'm sorry, but that's about all the time that we have. And as we conclude today's event, I'd like to express our gratitude to all our speakers and participants for engaging in such a vital discussion about disarmament and the importance of bringing these conversations forward. Your insights and contributions have highlighted the urgent need for action in promoting peace and securing a safer future for all. So, to the youth present here today, now we encourage you to become active advocates for nuclear disarmament and peace. You're starting right now, no? So even if it's not your major, it's so different from what you do. You can. Your voices are powerful tools for change, and your involvement can inspire future generations. So please join organizations, participate in community initiatives, and utilize, as what Ms. Mirma said, utilize social media to spread awareness about the dangers of nuclear weapons and the importance of disarmament. So together, let us work together. Let us work towards a world free of nuclear threats, fostering a culture of peace and security for everyone. Thank you for being a part of this very important conversation. Good night, everybody. Maraming salamat.
Thank you po.
Thank you.
Oh, there's a evaluation link, by the way.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So for those, can you kindly click on the evaluation link, which is in the chat, tama? Bianca, is it there already?
Yes, it should be there now.
Okay, so kindly click on that and please answer the evaluation because for those who want to receive a certificate, you have to accomplish the evaluation.
Yeah. Share it with your classmates.
Yes. So if they left ahead, please share it with them. Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Hi, Sir Mon.
Thank you to all our PCP officers, board members. Thank you.